if they can be made into a bomb, is often left in warehouses or facilities guarded by little more than a chain link fence, a padlock, and a guard that works during the day. And programs to eliminate this require Mission Impossible type scenarios. So I describe a couple of them in Bomb Scare about officials in the middle of the night in armored convoys moving, tens of pounds of this material, enough for several, sometimes dozens of weapons, through the streets at night, over to secure airfields, loading them on C-130s, flying them out of the countries. Sometimes we did it in Latvia, we did it in the Czech Republic, we've done it in Ukraine and Kazakhstan, and flying those to areas where they can be safely stored or, in some cases, eliminated.
Why is the U.S. doing that?
It's a national security interest. We do not want terrorists or other nations getting their hands on this material. See, terrorists can't build a nuclear weapon from scratch. That's the good news. This requires an industrial facility, billions of dollars, heavy energy, tremendous technical skill. But if they can get the material, particularly highly enriched uranium, then with a limited technical assistance, say some unemployed Russian scientists, they could construct a crude nuclear device, then smuggling it into the country is easy, and detonating it is easier still. So the key is to stop them from getting the material in the first place. That's why we spend about $1 billion a year on programs to do that.
How much money is the U.S. spending to reduce the nuclear weaponry in Russia?
About $1 billion a year.
That's all in Russia?
No, you're right. To break it down, it's about 3/4 of that money goes to the states of the former Soviet Union: Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, I think, has some fissile material left over. The nuclear weapons themselves are fairly secure in Russia, but we've spent over the last 15 years about $8 to $9 billion helping them collect those materials, secure them, providing them with armored trains, for example, to transport them, things like that, to make sure that those do not fall into the wrong hands.
Why is it that Russia has about 15,000 nuclear weapons and we have 10,000? Why can't we get them down faster?
We could. It's a choice not to. There were plans for the next round of negotiations with the Russians back in 2000 to go faster on the scheduled reductions and to start having discussions not just on the so-called strategic weapons, the one that Iran are bombers and missiles and subs, but to go to these tactical nuclear weapons, including those famous suitcase nukes you often hear about. But we're talking about artillery shells, land mines, and torpedoes, all kinds of short-range missions. But the current administration, the Bush administration, decided not to. They didn't want to have negotiations with the Russians anymore. They wanted to stop that process. And so they concluded a very brief treaty that accelerated the reductions in strategic systems, but left the total inventory up to each side to decide. That gave us tremendous flexibility, but it failed to capture the moment. It was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to get our hands on that Russian arsenal and to bring it down to thousands, maybe even hundreds.
What was their motive for not wanting to do this?
It was primarily U.S. focused. We wanted to have maximum flexibility so we could go down in our arsenal, or if we decided, we could go up in our arsenal. So the thinking of the administration at the time was that we were willing to trade off getting a handle on the Russian arsenal for this flexibility. I think it was a terrible decision, but it's the one it's been the policy of the United States for the last 6 years.
How many countries right now have the ability to deliver a nuclear weapon?
Deliver, that's an interesting point. We have 9 countries that have nuclear weapons, and in order of getting them, it's the United States, we got it in 1945, Russia got it in 1949, our ally United Kingdom, 1950, France, 1960, Red China, now the People's Republic, got it in 1964, and those are the 5 recognized nuclear weapon states, the ones that helped start the non-proliferation treaty in the 1960s. But then Israel has an arsenal they acquired beginning in the late 1960s. India detonated a peaceful device in 74, and then a series of tests in 1998, followed quickly by its neighbor Pakistan, and then just last December, North Korea detonated a nuclear weapons test in October. It's not clear they have a workable weapon, But that's the 9. Those are the 9 members so far.
Who else is close?
This is the good news, the only one that's close is really Iran. And they're still 5 to 10 years away from the ability to make the material. It's that making the material that's the long pole in the tent that prevents more countries from getting them.
What does uranium look like?
Uranium looks like granite. It's often found in granite. In fact, there's traces of uranium in most granite, and it's a dark metallic looking. And as you mill it, it takes different forms, and it goes from that sort of granite-like material to the yellow cake. And then, in order to make it into fuel rods or a bomb, you got to turn it into a gas. So it's basically invisible for a period while it's whipping through those centrifuges. And then it ends up as a dark powder. And then in a bomb, it's turned into a metal, and it's usually formed into a metal hemisphere.
What's the difference between uranium and plutonium?
Plutonium is even more fissile than plutonium.
And what does the word fissile mean?
Thank you. It means there's only certain materials that you can use to make a bomb. Uranium is one of them, plutonium is the other, and that's basically it. So we had a uranium bomb that we used on Hiroshima. We had a plutonium bomb that we used on Nagasaki. They're both very heavy metals. Uranium is the heaviest natural metal, so it's very dense, denser than lead. And plutonium is made from uranium in reactors. Every reactor produces a little plutonium as it burns up that nuclear fuel. And the two look very similar. It turns out that plutonium gives you sort of more bang for the buck. So you only need about 1/3 of much plutonium to make a bomb as you do uranium.
Why was the bomb at Nagasaki different from Hiroshima?
In the 1940s, when we were doing the Manhattan Project, we weren't sure which path was going to work. The scientists understood right away that if they could get enough concentrated uranium, they could make a bomb. And then around that time, in the 1940s, they discovered plutonium, understood the significance of that right away. But it was all about production. There was never a real secret to nuclear weapons, then or now. In fact, what allowed the United States to make the bomb when other countries couldn't was our industrial capability. Of the money that we spent on the Manhattan Project, which is about $23 billion in today's dollars, $22 billion of it went to the production of these two metals. We set up huge facilities so that at Oak Ridge, where we made our uranium, we had a big U-shaped building, and each leg of the building was a half-mile long, and that's where we went through the enrichment process of taking this uranium gas and refining it and refining it and refining it until we had enough for basically one bomb. And then over at Hanford, up in Washington State, we had reactors going, the first reactors ever built for the production, trying to produce the plutonium, and we didn't know which one was going to succeed, so we did both. It turns out by August 45, both had produced enough material for a bomb, so we used both.
Where do we get our uranium? Where do we get our plutonium? How much do we have?
We have uranium mines in the United States, but they weren't discovered until after the war. We got our uranium for those bombs from what was then called the Belgian Congo. It turns out uranium is pretty evenly distributed around the world, and many countries have uranium mines. So we get it from a variety of sources: Canada, Australia, United States mines themselves, and same with other countries. So Russia has mines, China has, Iran has mines.
Let's say you and I decided we wanted to lead the charge to build a nuclear weapon. What would we need?
You mean a C-SPAN nuclear bomb?
No. I mean, let's say that a country, and we knew what we were doing, and a country hired us that didn't have nuclear weapons right now. What would you need to start with?
Okay, right away you got some industrial engineers, because that's what you have to do first. You have to be able to build these kinds of factories. You'll need people who are expert on power to give the vast amounts of electricity you need for these. You'll need miners and mine engineers to go get the material, or entrepreneurs who can help you secure this on the international market. The famous uranium mines of Niger, for example, where Saddam Hussein was said to be looking for uranium. France gets its uranium from those Niger mines. You would then need nuclear scientists. You could probably pick up some